The universe of Dragon Ball has no shortage of cool humanoid aliens for us to reimagine, so let's take a look at one of the big ones, Namekians. Hey everyone, happy Pride Month! To celebrate, we're taking a look at an alien species that represents well the A in LGBTQIA+, Namekians, who display the usual sort of fun superpowers seen in this world, as well as their own particular properties, which means it should be fun to reimagine and redesign them in our style. Please consider liking, hyping and subscribing to give this video a fighting chance. And now, without further ado, let's get started! Today's file takes us to planet Namek, which was only discovered thanks to some of our planet's heroes of world adventures. This is a tidally locked planet that orbits a trinary star system, creating a half of the planet that is perpetually devoid of light and a half that is continuously under varying amounts of light, a phenomenon not dissimilar to other planets we've visited in the past. Most lifeforms in this planet can be found exclusively on the light side, and aside from a few lifeforms that have migrated from the light side and adapted to its conditions, life in the dark side is almost non-existent. Life has evolved in a myriad ways in this habitable zone, which is where we find today's research subject, a species that has evolved into sapience and civilization, mirroring the development of our own species, as well as, to a degree, our external appearance. Namekians, as they are usually referred to, or Triheliodemos deresoma, have long limbs that evolved as adaptations to climbing the rocky terrain, later readapted to traversing the prairies of its natural habitat, where they developed a bipedal, erect stance. Namekians also present a great degree of cephalization, their sensing organs being held at a high position from which they can more easily survey their environment. Their sense organs include 2 pairs of small eyes and 2 long antennae equipped with dozens of tiny, very sensitive fibrils, which detect vibrations in the air, thus helping them hear and detect the relative position of their bodies compared to nearby objects. Namekians, like many other lifeforms in their planet, are mixotrophs, meaning they alternate between many different sources for their nutrient and energy intakes. Namely, Namekians alternate between eating solid food obtained from their environment and producing biotic compounds from abiotic minerals found in their planet's liquid medium, aided by the light of their stars, a process similar to photosynthesis. The first of these is most useful when they need to gain biomass, such as when growing and developing into their adult stage, or when needing to recover from injuries. Fully grown, healthy adults will rely almost entirely on autotrophy, the photosynthesis-like process mentioned a moment ago. They are, mind you, still perfectly capable of ingesting and processing food for sustenance or, simply, for joy, gaining biomass as they do so, and even potentially becoming overweight as a result of this. While the species does present a degree of phenotypical variation, sexual dimorphism, or sexual characteristics of any kind, are completely absent. Upon further communication with the Namekians, we learned that the species is completely asexual, as is the case for many organisms that inhabit the planet. This does not mean, however, that the reproduction and evolution of the species is completely free of genetic recombination, but in order for us to learn how this works, we must first address some specific details about their biology. The bodies of Namekians are composed of basic elements that are, in essence, similar to our own cells, specialized functional units contained within a defined membrane. But, unlike our cells, these ones do not arrange themselves in what we understand as tissues or organs, but in functional cell clusters that perform a single function. These clusters are delimited by an external, lipid-rich layer that holds these cells in place and connects them to other functional clusters through ports and tubes, which transport nutrients and byproducts from one to the other. A neural matrix runs all through these clusters, actually a fluid network secreted by the neural cluster, which permeates all membranes and cells. This matrix relays information from the central neural cluster to the entire body, be it sensory information or orders for individual clusters. The external layer is composed of strong, elastic protein-like fibers that make its structure very malleable, and by applying pressure through muscular fibers that cross their surface, Namekians can alter their shape at will, rearranging the form and position of their cell clusters to fit their needs at the moment. Evolutionarily speaking, this mechanism was derived from the way the ancient organisms that lived in Namek would respond to different light conditions by changing the amount of skin that was exposed to the light, as well as their digestive method, which would see them invert their entire digestive system to feed. This rearrangement process is still useful for such purpose, and applied redirection of cells and clusters has allowed Namekians to develop the ability to regain lost limbs, or as seen in some individuals, moving hard, structural inner clusters to form armor around their soft tissues. Although useful, it is a slow and energetically taxing process, forcing Namekians to be strategic about its usage. Their outer body layers, corresponding with our muscle and skin, are comparatively less malleable than their insides, due to their functional and structural needs, but these still present a degree of elasticity. In order to accommodate for these needs, Namekians, like most lifeforms in their planet, have their tegumentary clusters arranged in a series of discrete plates, with much more flexible intertegumentary regions located between these, observable as a series of yellowish or pink patches and red seams, allowing them to retain a degree of flexibility on their outer bodies. Thanks to these intertegumentary regions, Namekians are capable of stretching their limbs to a very high degree, which is very useful during combat situations or when traversing complicated terrain, even being capable of seemingly increasing in size as an intimidation technique. These external body arrangements are much more simple than full internal rearrangements, and so Namekians can use them to a much greater extent as part of their daily activities. Aside from granting individuals the ability to alter their bodies at will, these soft, malleable body units allow Namekians to do something that was once thought to only be possible at a much smaller scale: complete body recombination. Two or more Namekians can, in essence, fuse their bodies into one as a way to combine their physical traits, mental patterns, and genetic information. As they initiate this process, the external body layers of individuals become softer and receptive. The two Namekians will join their bodies together, and the external layers of individual clusters will begin dissolving and joining together one by one, forming a new cluster that contains the cells of both individuals. As may be imagined, this process is quite complex and exhausting, requiring a long time to be finished, and with a good part of the biomass of the fusing Namekians being consumed in order to fuel the fusion. Recombination between increasing amounts of Namekians will take even longer, but will, paradoxically, be much less tiring, as the process will have much more biomass to consume as fuel. The neural matrix will dissolve at the beginning of the process, mercifully stopping Namekians from filling it, only forming again after it is completed. By this point, all of the traits of the composing Namekians will have combined with one another, in a way averaging the content of both. Physical traits will, in general, be enhanced by the process, as there will be a net increase in biomass, making the resulting Namekian bigger and stronger than either of its components. The newly formed nervous system will contain knowledge and memories of all the combined Namekians, something that can be rather disorienting the older the Namekians involved were. But that's nothing the new individual cannot get accustomed to. Additionally, Namekians that have attained a large enough biomass have the ability to not only fuse it with others, but divide it, separating their cells and placing them in newly formed individual holding layers. The result, and the main purpose of this, being the creation of clonal offspring, with the same genetic information as the parent. When the parental Namekian is the result of a fusion between many different individuals, this offspring will be composed of cells with the genetic identity of each of the components of the parent, acting as a form of genetic recombination. This process, as well as spontaneous mutations formed during cellular growth, constitute the source of most genetic variation present in the species. Once the new cluster layers are fully formed, this offspring will be released from the parent's body inside an egg-like casing, where the tissues will finish arranging themselves into their final form, later emerging and beginning their own maturation process, while retaining a semblance of their parents' memories and knowledge. But if done carelessly, or without taking care of the heavy physical toll it will take, it can lead to both the parent and its offspring being too weak and vulnerable, possibly not surviving the process. This fission, however, has its uses beyond reproduction, as Namekian organisms have been known to utilize the same mechanism to discard cells, or even entire clusters, that were affected by diseases too invasive or too dangerous to be dealt with through natural regeneration alone. This can be used, by the same token, to eliminate from their nervous system areas that contained traumatic memories or parts of their personalities they wished to rid themselves of. It was thanks to this process, as well as an extremely reduced ingestion of food, which eliminated the uptake of most toxins, that Namekians are capable of reaching their extremely long lifespans. But it has not come without unintended consequences. Some ruthless Namekians have been known to use this process while producing living offspring, saddling them with everything they did not desire to have on themselves. While not as immediately malicious, many Namekians would also use this process to create offspring with very specific physical and mental traits, something that would lead to a form of eugenesis and the creation of custom-made soldiers that would end up fighting and dying in senseless conflicts. It might go without saying that modern Namekian society heavily frowns upon both of these practices, severely punishing those who partake in them. Finally, Namekians count themselves among the very few organisms that have evolved and developed their society not only around their environment and each other, but also around the presence of organisms whose power far outweighs everything around them. Gods. At some point during their history, Namekians contacted an organism they have named Porunga, meaning, in their own language, Dragon of Dreams. Contact between the two was rather positive, and led to Namekians forging a series of artifacts, the Dragon Balls, crafted from ancient crystalline formations that attracted and held high quantities of omega particles within them. When joined together, the concentration would act as a beacon for Porunga, calling them down to Namek. Namekians would utilize these artifacts to summon Porunga during times of great need. Its vast abilities, based on the omega particles we are by now familiarized with, allowing it to help this species in whatever form was asked of it. Once this process is finished, the Dragon Balls will take some time to regain the concentrations of omega particles needed for this purpose. Hence why they are only used in times when all other options have been exhausted, lest their improper use leads to them being unavailable when truly needed. Fascinatingly, the proximity to these crystals and to the dragon itself caused the dispersion of residual omega particles over the lands of Namek, far too little to have any noticeable effect on the world around them. But Namekians, by that time understanding their nature, if only in basic terms, used their own inherent physiology to create specialized organs within their bodies, with special cells that would allow them to hold the byproducts of omega particle activity within themselves, giving them something similar to the bile sac of the boiling isles, and with similar effects. This organ could be developed by individuals with proper knowledge and training, and they could utilize it to power themselves during high-stress situations, such as hunts or fights, to propel their own bodies through the air and even shoot forth devastating beams of ionizing energy. After contact with the Saiyans, this ability was likened to and considered as an extension of their concept of ki, as their outwards effects were, all in all, rather similar. Unlike the ki of Saiyans, however, Namekians could also utilize it in seemingly more mystical ways, including the ability to heal others, combine and rearrange matter to create objects, and even communicate with others and move things with their mind alone. Again, more similar to the magical abilities seen in the Boiling Isles. And that's it for Speculative Biology look into Namekians. As with all of these episodes, I've had a blast turning these alien creatures into something far more alien than the usual dude with antennae. And in this case, I took quite a bit of inspiration from the real-life sort of inspiration. Slugs, especially in the head area, taking care to mix the usual features of Namekians with those of these mollusks, but adapting the rest of the body into a more sectioned, vertebrate-looking appearance, because their being able to fight and punch was also an important part of the whole thing. Their cell arrangement was also really fun, since it required them to be able to fuse and break apart with more individuals in a way our very structured and defined anatomy does not allow. And this even helped inform their anatomy and fighting abilities, tying them right back to their internal physiology with a neat little bow. And then, of course, we also took a dive into the Dragon Balls and the magic they are tied to as well, since in this channel queerness and magic go together like peanut butter and jelly. I hope you guys had fun today, and please let me know what other Dragon Ball thingies you'd like me to take a look at on the channel. Maybe Cell? Or a further exploration on the Dragon Balls themselves? You just tell me down there. As always, here's a big thank you to everyone who asked to see this episode. I hope you liked watching it as much as I liked making it. And also thank you to our researchers and research associates who support us through Patreon and YouTube memberships, and who voted for this episode to be featured as part of our Pride season. Remember, if you'd like to watch all of our videos and creatures before anyone else, help create them, and even vote for future episodes on our polls, please consider joining our Patreon as well. Your support will be immensely appreciated. Or you can also like, subscribe, or write a comment telling me any type of creature you would like me to give the Spec Evo treatment in the show. Any of those really help the channel a lot. Thank you all for watching, and see you next time on the Speculative Wildlife Research Center.